Trump now putting his hand on the Bible. Fascinating. Elon doing that. Interesting. I think I figured out why this is, though, and I'm going to tell you why. It's because we're not home yet. It's important for us to remember what is in store for the world. This is to be expected. Everything that you're seeing, we're seeing a government, exchange of power that just took place. And there's somebody who is taking the reins that is going to have a lot of control, a lot of power over the next 4 years, and he's going to have control over his government. And so I would like to kind of shift the focus over to the perfect government that is yet future. And this is where it gets exciting, because you and I are living in a world where we are seeing governments all over the place interact with one another. We're seeing what's wrong with the governments. We're seeing all this, the brokenness of all the systems that are put in place. We're seeing things being changed around because of how ineffective the programs are that are set up right now. But there is coming a day when there's going to be a new government. Let's talk about some of these things in this new government that we have to look forward to. This new government is going to be what you and I can refer to as the millennial kingdom, which is when Jesus is going to come back. And when he comes back, he is going to set up his government. But there's some characteristics that we can focus on that are a part of his perfect government. So check it out. Isaiah 32 verse 16, it says, this is describing the peace of God's reign in contrast to humankind's reign. During God's reign, it says, then justice will dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the fruitful field. The work of righteousness will be peace, and the effect of righteousness, quietness and assurance forever. My people will dwell in a peaceful habitation, in secure dwellings, and in quiet resting places, and it goes on. But my point here is to focus on these words here: justice, righteousness, work of righteousness, peace, quietness, assurance, peacefulness. All of these words are paint, or should in some kind of capacity paint a picture to you and I as to what we have to look forward to. But right now we are living in a time period where we are under sinful governments, and that is what we are seeing, and that explains why we see what we see take place whenever somebody gets inaugurated, or all the questions of why this is happening or why this is happening. It's because we're not home yet. A little bit more description about this future millennial kingdom. In Isaiah 51 verse 3, it says, for the Lord will comfort Zion. He will comfort all her waste places. He will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in it, thanksgiving and the voice of melody. It's really interesting because right now when you compare everything that we just read right there and we put it up against what we're used to down here right now in this government that we're a part of right now, it is a very distinct difference. And so this is a good time to just compare and contrast what we have right now to what we have to look forward to when Jesus returns. So we're talking about this kingdom, and let's check it out in scripture. In Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6 and 7, it says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. Those are two very different events. One, that he's born, that happened in Bethlehem. Unto us a son is given, that is a completely different situation that happened at Golgotha. But as you continue reading, it says, and the government will be upon his shoulder. The government is something that we need to focus on, but it says his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom. So you have two things that I want you to pay attention to. You have his government here, and his kingdom. So you have two things: his government and his kingdom. When Jesus returns back to the earth, he is going to set up his kingdom, and within his kingdom, he is going to have a government. And this is why it gets really fun, because this is what we're talking about in our study of the book of Revelation right now. If you want to go check it out, it's up on YouTube. There's a link in my TikTok profile. It's ITZ_sheesh. But we've been talking a lot about the millennial kingdom. There's people who think that the millennial kingdom is not a literal thing. They think it's allegory, it's symbolic, it's not going to actually take place. I, on the other hand, argue much differently. I think that it is needing to go, it's needing to take place because it's needed to happen because there's many things that need to be fulfilled, that are going to be fulfilled during this millennial kingdom. But we see two things here. We see his government and his kingdom. His government and his kingdom. Those are two very different things. So when Jesus returns back to the earth, he is going to set up his kingdom and then his government. You and I, if you're a born again believer, we are going to be a part of that government. And so this is why it's so fascinating to look at what's going on in our world today, because we are looking at this new administration that is now entering the White House, and many people are freaking out and they're like, oh great, I can't wait for 4 more years of this. And then you have the other side of people who are saying like, I can't believe he got in office. And you have both sides of the coin that everybody's arguing about. Meanwhile, I want you to remember that this is a broken government and it's never going to be perfect. We understand that there are certain things that need to happen before Jesus can return. And so there's a difference between Jesus returning to the earth and the rapture. There's something that is called a pre-tribulation rapture. I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. If you see differently, that's completely fine. But there's an order of events that is going to take place, and my opinion is that the very next thing is going to be a rapture. I think there is a pre-tribulation rapture. There's nothing that needs to take place in order for that to occur. It could happen right now. And so if the rapture occurs, then the next thing that happens after the rapture is a 7-year tribulation. At the end of 7 years, Jesus returns back to the earth. You have the Battle of Armageddon, which is more like a campaign of Armageddon because there's multiple battles. He returns back to Basra. He makes his way back to Jerusalem. And then after that, he tears down the abomination of desolation. You have multiple things, the sheep and goat judgments. But then after those things take place, then he sets up his millennial kingdom. During the millennial kingdom, Satan is going to be bound for 1,000 years, which means that he's not going to be able to run around and deceive people. But during the millennial kingdom, there's still going to be sin on the earth. And this is why it gets so dynamic, because people have a hard time understanding, wait a second, if God's ruling, how is there still sin on the earth? And that's a great question, but this is some deep stuff that is good to unpack. Because when you and I are reigning with him, if you're a born-again believer, will reign with him, which is really cool. The question is, who are we reigning over? And there needs to be somebody there that is under us in order for us to reign over them. Well, this is why it's important to understand the sheep and goat judgments, because the human beings who actually make it through the 7-year tribulation are going to physically walk into this kingdom. And when they physically walk into this kingdom, right when the clock starts for the 1,000 years of millennial kingdom to take place, those humans who enter into the millennial kingdom are all Christians, but they still have their unglorified bodies. So they're going to sin here and there. They're going to mess up, but they're going to have babies. Their children are going to have children going to have children, all for 1,000 years. And then at the end of 1,000 years, Satan is going to be released and he's going to go deceive. And that opens up the whole conversation for what takes place in Revelation chapter 20. But we'll get to that in the study. My point here is to get you to understand there is a government and there is a kingdom. It is his kingdom and it is his government. We need to be sensitive to that because that is very literal. During this millennial kingdom where Jesus is reigning as king, he is going to be over a perfect kingdom and a perfect government. But they are going to be ruling over sinful people because they still have unglorified bodies. In Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, it says, "Now it shall come to pass in the latter days," which is speaking of the millennial kingdom, "Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it." How cool is that kind of picture that we see there? I don't have much time left. Let's keep reading. "Many people shall come and say, 'Come and let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations and rebuke many people. They shall beat their plows into plowshares," and it goes on. These people are basically going to forget how to war. They're going to forget how to battle. They're going to turn all their weaponry into farm equipment. But basically what I want you to be sensitive to here in verse 3 is it says, "For out of Zion shall go forth the law." That is God's law. God is going to be in Jerusalem, in Zion, in his temple, and out of that temple is going to go forth the law. That is the kingdom law that is going to be enacted during this time period. Guys, this is the kingdom that we are looking forward to. You know, in Matthew chapter 6, where it says, thy kingdom come, that is what we have to look forward to. So this administration, it's broken, and it's never going to be perfect until Jesus returns. And guys, I think we're really close. I think we're in the last seconds of the last minute right now. And so give your life to the Lord if you're thinking about it. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks.